Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Monday the 20th of December and this is Scotland at 7. I'm Andrew Wilson and today I'm hosting the programme from Edinburgh. So first we will have today's coronavirus update, then I will give you then I will introduce our guest for this evening, and then we will look at today's news headlines from Scotland and around the world together. As of 2 p.m. today, since the start of the pandemic, a total of 3,851,815 people in Scotland have been tested through the NHS Scotland labs and the UK Government regional testing centres. Of these, 3,045,120 have been confirmed negative, and 806,695 have tested positive. There are 6,734 new cases of COVID-19 confirmed by a test, although not everyone with the virus will display symptoms and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There are no new reported deaths of people in Scotland who have tested positive, and that means that the number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 9,781. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test in the previous 28 days. The latest UK daily figures show that 147,261 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, and that is an increase of 44 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just in hospitals. And as of 8 a.m. this morning, 4,372,129 people had received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, 3,993,642 had received their second dose, and 2,561,480 have received their third dose or their booster jab. Now then, this evening we're lucky enough to be joined by Douglas Chapman MP. Douglas has been the SNP MP for Dunfermline and East Fife since the general election in 2015, and before that he was a councillor in Rosyth and North Queensferry. Douglas, good evening, how are you?
Good evening, Andrew, great to see you.
And thank you for joining us this evening on Broadcasting Scotland, Douglas. It's great to see you. Now, our first story is that the UK government have said they are letting the Scottish government draw down an additional £220 million on top of £220 million already announced from next year's supplementary estimates funding process. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, responded by saying that the £220 million announced last week was not new or additional and was actually £48 million less than the Scottish Government had been expecting. She said that she was seeking confirmation if this new £220 million is additional or has to be repaid. The First Minister expressed her concern that as infections soar and businesses suffer, there needs to be much more urgency in action and support from the UK Government so that devolved government hands are not tied. Ms Sturgeon said it was disappointing and frustrating that neither the Prime Minister nor the Chancellor attended yesterday's COBRA meeting. So, Douglas, first of all, is this another indication of the need for substantial reform of the fiscal framework that sets the rules for the return of money to be spent in Scotland by the Scottish Government?
Well, let me go straight for the jugular on that one. I think it's time for independence. I think that would sort out all these misunderstandings and ways of really dealing with Scotland's finances. But as long as we're within the current union, then it's totally unacceptable that the Scottish Government and our Finance Minister and our First Minister should be placed in this position. And I've got some sympathy for the equivalent numbers in Northern Ireland and Wales as well. It seems like the money that does come through the Barnett formula and the consequentials. Now imagine getting that money when you've only got like 3 months of the financial year to run. You're already trying to work out a settlement with local government who provide vital services across all our communities. We're trying to deal with a pandemic which is putting fantastic strain on public services more generally, and across the business sector as well. And to deal with Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland in such an amateurish, cack-handed way is just beyond the pale. And really, it's you're talking about reform, but the UK aren't tremendously good at doing this kind of thing. They're not good at reforming and admitting their mistakes and trying to rebalance the economy in the way that we would want to rebalance it here in Scotland. And I think we've only seen as well, I don't want to go on to another topic, but we've seen all the levelling up debacle as well over the last couple of years, and how inappropriate that is for the needs of Scotland. That you decide from a London perspective to completely ignore the Scottish Government, the Scottish Parliament completely, and try to deliver a lower level of funding directly to local authorities. And it's I think the whole situation is just totally unsustainable.
Thanks, Douglas. It's a good point. Do you think in terms of the politics of this, this will help people understand the nature of the way in which the Scottish Government is currently funded from Westminster, both in terms of the realisation and the recognition that the money that's being spent originated in Scotland, and also that, as you say, the way in which the money is allocated depends upon the political choices and spending decisions taken by a Westminster government thinking about how they want to spend money in England. And so do you think that this issue at the moment is going to help clarify and help more people understand the circumstances that we're currently in?
Well, exactly, and I think it's a hard lesson for us to learn again, because most of us, I think, in Scotland now have got the message that that Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland basically are financial afterthought to what's required. Whatever's required in England, then we get the crumbs off the table, and. But we do need that level of understanding, because we're in terms of aiming for a positive independence vote, we're not quite there yet, and we need to get more and more people convinced of the fact that we can actually run things a lot better ourselves, and not rely on the Westminster Treasury for the funding that we do need. But while we're within the Union, obviously, Kate Forbes and Nicola don't have the wherewithal to, or the borrowing powers, for example, to set up a furlough scheme, for example. So we're caught in this catch-22 situation where it's only if it's a problem in England and they need to throw money at something, then only then do we get the benefit of the largesse of the Treasury. But if we wanted to give money to, for example, the big story I think on the last week is about the hospitality sector. But so if Scotland wanted to give money to the hospitality sector, then we give all our tax revenues to the Treasury and rely on them, trusting them to give it back to Scotland, or some of it back to Scotland. But we just don't have that ability to do that. We can't borrow money in Scotland, can't certainly borrow to a large extent, and nothing that would look at introducing a furlough scheme, for example. So yeah, I think in terms of the catch-22 nature of devolution, then this last period has actually shown that to be totally inadequate for Scotland's requirements and Scotland's needs. And I think we would be able to do a much better job as they can do. They can make decisions in Copenhagen and in Stockholm and Oslo and so on, without referring to near neighbours. They can just make these decisions. They can borrow the money they require on the international markets, and they can make the provision for whether it be public services and for schools and hospitals and NHS, or whether they need to borrow to actually support business through very, very difficult times and help people retain their jobs and make sure that they've got jobs to go back to should there be another period of lockdown, which I hope there won't be. But it just points to the weakness of devolution and why we need to be an independent country and hold our heads high in the same way as the Norwegians, the Swedes, and the Danes do.
Thanks, Douglas. It also crossed my mind in the context of this story today that we know that Boris Johnson doesn't have a great reputation for planning or for fiscal responsibility, for that matter. I'm thinking of planned garden bridges. But is it fair that other administrations which do want to plan and do want to be responsible have to suffer as a result of the way in which the current fiscal framework operates for the devolved nations across the UK?
Well, again, Andrew, I mean, you're asking all the best questions tonight. I think we've got a government in London who could find the time to plan for Christmas parties last year, but can't find the wherewithal to plan for the future. I believe there was a meeting tonight, a corporate meeting tonight, where Boris Johnson came out, and I didn't actually hear it, so I'm hearing it second hand. But I believe he came out and really didn't say very much at all. There was no change in direction, no sense of decisions having been made that would actually help the situation. I think the difference between what the information people are getting in Scotland and what's being said south of the border is quite stark. And I think every poll that I've seen certainly suggests that at least the messaging in Scotland has been straightforward. It's been clear. It's been off a standard that you expect of the leader of the nation. Wherein, as when we hear people standing outside Number 10 or in a room with the bedecked and Union flags, then that information that's coming forward to the English population is not as clear or definite. And at a time of crisis, that's what you need. People need that level of certainty, that level of confidence that their leaders are making the right decisions, or as best the decisions they can make as possible given the circumstances. And I think, to be fair to Nicola Sturgeon, I think she's come out head and shoulders above anything that I've seen coming from either 10 Downing Street or the UK government over the last 2 years.
Absolutely. Thanks, Douglas. And one final question on this story. I mentioned that Ms Sturgeon said it was disappointing and frustrating that neither the Prime Minister nor the Chancellor showed up for the Cobra meeting yesterday. Now, that meeting, as I understand it, was to discuss finances and financial support. So what does the non-appearance of both the Prime Minister and the Chancellor at this Cobra meeting yesterday, what does that tell us, do you think, about their attitudes?
Well, it is all about messaging and the kind of message you send to the your wider public in these circumstances. And again, I think Nicola Sturgeon would be the first person to admit that she hasn't got everything absolutely right. But she's been there every day. She's stood in front of the cameras. She's given as clear a message as she could possibly muster to the Scottish public. And you actually need your leaders to turn up and be present at these things and make sure that especially when you're dealing with three other parts of the UK, Northern Ireland, Wales, and Scotland. It's not always as easy to extrapolate what's in the Prime Minister's head, and we're often left thinking, well, what does that mean for Scotland, or what does that mean for Wales? And it's just not good enough. It's just not a professional way of managing the nation's finances and managing the messaging that needs to be so spot on in terms of what we're telling the public. And what we've lost through Boris Johnson, I think, is that just that lack of trust in government, and that is a real serious issue. When people start to lose trust in the people who they voted for, then I think you're on very, very thin ice. And because if they don't believe you on like COVID, then they're not going to maybe believe you on the economy, or having to pay more tax further down the line, or believe you that or believe that we need to find more money for the NHS or whatever. So it just undermines the whole fabric of society, and I think that's the bigger danger in having such an incompetent Prime Minister.
Absolutely. Thanks, Douglas. We'll move on from discussing the fiscal framework and the politics around it, because following a new photo emerging of Boris Johnson and his staff at a Downing Street gathering in May 2020, which they had previously denied, the SNP has said that a judge-led inquiry into gatherings and Christmas parties during COVID restrictions is the only way to get to the bottom of things. Commenting, the SNP Deputy Westminster leader Kirsten Oswald MP said, "This new photo raises more questions and erodes public trust further, given Downing Street denied this gathering ever took place. A judge-led inquiry is the only way to get to the bottom of all of this after the Cabinet Secretary and the Prime Minister have both been found to have held and attended parties and gatherings at a time when the rest of us were told to abide by coronavirus restrictions." Douglas, how much more of a mess of the handling of the reporting of these meetings can Downing Street make? I say that in part because Dominic Raab was put up this morning, and I think it's fair to say that he did not give a great account of himself on the news shows and in the studios this morning. So is Downing Street capable of beginning to arrest or to stem the flow of horror at the mess of this handling?
Well, I think every day we're seeing different pictures from different parties. I don't mean political parties, but Christmas parties. It seems to be that if there was a party with games and quizzes and different things and a full buffet in 10 Downing Street, we now found out, I think I saw pictures today of one in the garden of 10 Downing Street where it was more cheese and wine. But all these things are happening like minutes after the political elite have given their views of what the public should be doing to keep themselves safe, to keep their families safe, to keep their communities safe. And then minutes later, they're out on the terrace, or they're in another room somewhere, completely flouting all the information and advice they've just given to the rest of us. So, I'm not surprised that Dominic Raab struggled with his interview today, because there's absolutely nowhere this government can go on this. What do? You say one thing one day, and somebody comes up with a picture the following day to actually blow that line out of the water completely. So, I think the big thing is that, again, it's coming back to that issue I was just talking about recently, it was a few minutes ago, is about trust in the government. And, we've got a government in Westminster that we just cannot trust. We can't trust them to tell the truth. They'll not tell the truth in the House of Commons. They'll not tell the truth outside of the House of Commons over their parties. And really what Kirsten was saying today, I think, is that we've also had the person who was investigating it, the Permanent Secretary, I believe, and he had a party this time last year when he should have been knowing better and actually telling his troops and his team that, go home and enjoy your Christmas at home and don't flout the laws. And, he himself has been caught red-handed doing this very thing. So what Kirsten Oswald is asking for is absolutely the right thing in terms of having a judge-led inquiry into all these parties. The people there were breaking the law, full stop. So how do you actually do that? And you just really can't have someone who's internal looking at that. We need somebody with a clear mind, clear head, and look at the evidence that's presented. And the evidence does exist. I can't believe for 1 minute why the Metropolitan Police have not pursued looking for evidence. That's the whole point of having a police inquiry, is to collect evidence to make the case. But if you're not prepared to collect the evidence, then you can't turn around and say, well, there's no evidence if we've not bothered to collect anything. So personally, I'd love to see Pippa Crerar from the Daily Mirror put in charge of the Met Police. I think she would actually stir things up a wee bit, and she seems to be very well informed about all these things, much more than the Met Police chief. So why not? The Tories are really good at putting their mates into top jobs, so maybe I should put one of my mates into a top job. Maybe that'd be quite good.
Definitely. Thanks, Douglas. We'll move on now, and that's because the SNP has accused Douglas Ross of a serious failure of leadership after it emerged he has allowed a Tory councillor who ran an anonymous Twitter troll account to stand again for re-election in May next year. The Angus councillor Derek Wan was exposed by the Courier earlier this year for running the Lady Whistledown troll account on Twitter that sent targeted abuse at local politicians and was described as misogynistic and transphobic. Despite that, it has now emerged that the Tories let Councillor Wan off by sending him on social media training. He even intends on standing again at the local elections in May. The SNP had previously called for Douglas Ross to sack Derek Wan from the party due to his unacceptable behaviour. The SNP MSP Joe Fitzpatrick said, "This is a serious failure of leadership from Douglas Ross. By allowing Derek Wan to not only stay in his party, but permitting him to stand for elected office again, he is effectively turning a blind eye to his misconduct." So, Douglas, two questions. Firstly, what do you think this tells us about the standards and state of the Tory party in Scotland at the moment?
I want to touch on as well just the scourge and the opportunity there is social media as well. We'll come back to that in a minute. But I think where people go over the line, and in this case, I don't know the ins and outs. I'm not a follower of either Lady Whistledown or Derek Wan on any social media platform, I don't think. But what I would say is that there is a strict code of conduct in terms of what councillors can do, and again, I would hope that I don't know if it's been investigated or not, but certainly I think you need, again, it comes down to leadership and whether Mr. Wan is in a position where he looks at his own behaviour and thinks, well, you know what I've been doing is unacceptable and I'm really sorry and apologise. Either that or it goes further up internally within the party and you have someone who has got strong moral values and has a sense of decency and a modicum of leadership ability, and you think, well, what they should be doing is saying, look, Councillor Wan, you've got this totally wrong, you either apologise or you get out. And I think that I don't know which ward it is, but I'm sure the good people of Angus will make their views known in the elections next May, and I think I would hope that they see good sense and say, well, do we want somebody like this actually representing us in the council chambers? And I am hopeful that they'll use their good sense to make sure that they vote for someone else who has got the values that we all aspire to as politicians, a sense of decency and a sense of honesty, and have that ability to hold your hands up when you get it wrong. And as a councillor, as an MP, I've made mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, but it sounds like the behaviour of this particular individual has gone beyond or across the line, and it's a shame that Douglas Ross doesn't have the guts to actually give him the red card, as I'm sure he would if it was happening on a football park.
Absolutely. And you've answered the second question there. I was going to ask you what you thought the electorate were going to do in Angus, but you've covered that one. So we'll move on to our next story now, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Analysis conducted by the Food and Drink Federation has revealed that Scotland's whisky and salmon exports were down by 11% and 6.4% respectively since 2019. The analysis also found that the UK's total exports of food and drink was down by £2.7 billion. That's about almost 16% in the first 3 quarters of 2021, with £2.4 billion of that drop directly from the reduction in sales to the EU. Exports to key markets such as Germany, Italy and Spain have also dropped significantly since 2019, with exports to Ireland down by more than a quarter. Imports from the EU have also reduced by nearly 11% in 2021, with trade to countries such as the Netherlands, Ireland and Germany all down. Commenting, the SNP's Shadow International Trade spokesperson Drew Hendry MP said, "This is the harsh reality of Boris Johnson's Brexit Britain. The Prime Minister, alongside his band of Brexiteers, have inflicted this damage on Scotland against its will, with hundreds of industries across the country being hammered." The UK government continues to argue that Brexit will be good for UK trade, but official statistics repeatedly show a major reduction in the value of exports and trade. Nearly every sector is reporting serious disruption to their business models, with trade bodies predicting it will only get worse. So Douglas, firstly, are you seeing or hearing any impact on businesses in Dunfermline and East Fife as a result of Brexit?
Yeah, well, I'm in West Fife, but I mean we
West Fife.
We won't fall out over that particular issue. But yeah, I mean, I think the main thing here is the damage long term to what is a very serious situation and what is a very important sector for the Scottish economy. I mean, food and drink. Really has been for decades now, has been one of the mainstays of the Scottish economy, and whether that's whisky and gin, or whether it's high quality salmon from Scotland, I think these are really iconic, let's say iconic brands within all of that sector. And we really need to protect as much of that trade as we possibly can. There obviously been probably a turn down globally in terms of like people not going out and drinking in bars or maybe going out for meals, but certainly there's a lot more drinking from home and so on. But yeah, and the main thing is that it's at the core of this, and I think you mentioned about the comments from Drew Hendry there. I think Drew's got it absolutely spot on. That the impact of Brexit is really harming the Scottish economy, and particularly the food and drink sector, beyond what was originally anticipated. We knew it would be bad, but I think the figures are bearing out many of the worries and many of the warnings that we gave in the House of Commons prior to the Brexit vote going through, and what's happened since then as well. So I think we're in really quite dangerous territory here, and we need to get round the table and work out how do we regain some of that lost ground. So how do we regain these markets? And quite honestly, that's again to quote maybe one of my other colleagues at Westminster, Angus Brendan McNeill. I think Angus puts out regular tweets and regular messages regarding the money that or the trading power that we've lost through Brexit, and then you get like Liz Truss coming out and saying, well, I've just done this deal with New Zealand, and Angus Brennan will tell you, well, the deal with New Zealand is a tiny fraction of what the benefit was of being within the EU. And all these deals are played up as being, fantastic deals for the UK, fantastic deals for Scotland or whatever, and they are not replacing the good trading conditions and good access to market that we had prior to Brexit. There's no way that's even getting near that. So I think the need is there, and again, I've pointed a few times tonight to the need for independence, and all these things just point in the same direction. We're trusting people that we shouldn't trust to manage our economy. Why are we doing that? Why do we do that? And
Absolutely, Douglas.
I think it's the more we can, at least have some control over the direction of travel within our own key sectors, within the Scottish economy. And that's I look forward to the day when we can actually do that, and actually have control over some of the best produce produced anywhere in the world. We've got it all. Whether you talk about Scotch lamb, beef, whiskey, salmon, these are all key parts of the Scottish economy, and every one of the part of that sector, the food sector in general, is being let down badly by the UK government. And it's a real shame for
Thanks,
people
Douglas.
who have worked so hard to build up the reputation of Scottish food and drink for decades, and that's been lost just in a snap of a finger.
Absolutely. Thanks, Douglas. We'll move on now, because serious failings in a rescue operation may have contributed to the deaths of 27 refugees in the English Channel last month, according to lawyers representing bereaved family members. Calls for a public inquiry to determine whether acts or omissions by UK agencies resulted in human rights breaches came alongside separate legal cases against UK and French authorities involved in the operations. On Monday, relatives of two of the men lost at sea have started a legal process in the UK calling for an independent public inquiry to establish the full facts of what happened on the night of the 24th of November. Meanwhile, Utopia 56, an organisation that supports refugees in northern France, has lodged a complaint in the Paris prosecutor's office. Hundreds more refugees have made the hazardous sea crossing in the last few days. The BBC reported that more than 100 people crossed during it. The Maritime Experts Report was commissioned by the UK lawyers for relatives of two men known or believed to have died in November's incident, and it comments on potential problems that night. Saman Alipur, an Iranian Kurd, has embarked on the legal action on behalf of his brother, Sirwan Alipur. Sirwan's body has been identified, and the family travelled to Tehran to receive his body on Monday. The second person involved in the action is Zana Mamand Mohammed, whose brother Twana is believed to have died in the tragedy. Twana's body has never been found. The Utopia 56 complaint has been filed against the Maritime Prefect of the Channel and North Sea, the Grenay-Pas-de-Calais Regional Operational Surveillance and Rescue Centre, and the UK Coast Guard. It refers to manslaughter and the failure to provide assistance at sea. So, Douglas, first of all, in terms of the last point there, we know that the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, made a number of comments that suggested that she wished to try and somehow dissuade the lifeboat service from fulfilling its duties and rescuing people who are in danger at sea. So, do you think that this legal action is going to underline just how far adrift the Home Secretary is in terms of her attitude and her approach to these refugees who are travelling across the English Channel?
Yeah, well, I think Priti Patel has been in that space for quite a long time now, and at the end of the day, it's here we are, what, a few days away from Christmas, and we've got people having to get into rubber dinghies on one side of the channel and try and make a perilous journey across uncertain waters to try and get to the UK. The situation is so complex and complicated. I appreciate all that, and there's a lot of people making an awful lot of money out of this as well. There's a lot of organised crime involved, but there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of effort trying to get to the bottom of this. And to be fair, a lot of the situations have actually been that the people are fleeing from have actually been created by the West or countries in the West themselves. So we're dealing with as I say, a very, very complex set of circumstances. But at the end of the day, they're human beings, and we should be trying to find a different way of actually managing some of these situations, so that the human being is put at the centre of things, and not the money that some sort of people smuggler will make, or what this foreign secretary might think of the contribution that people coming to this country might be able to make. It must be, I can't even begin to think what it would be like to be sitting in some camp in north of France or near the Channel, and have to think about how I get my family to, if I want to come to the UK, how do I get my family into a rubber dinghy and get them to cross the English Channel in the dead of night, when in the middle of winter, and that we have a government and a foreign secretary who just does not care two hoots about me or my family or our well-being. And the way that people are treated in these circumstances is just beyond the pale. And quite honestly, I'm embarrassed by the fact that we do that to people. I think we all remember the picture of the wee lad who was sort of washed up on the beach, and sort of just lying there face down in the sand. That's what we're prepared to do to people, and I just find it terribly upsetting. It's not the way I would want things to be. I appreciate the complexity of it, but I think we should be doing a lot more in terms of understanding the problem, getting to the root of the criminality that is actually triggering a lot of this, and making sure that people are treated as human beings and not just as fodder that can be thrown away at a foreign secretary's whim. It's disgraceful.
Absolutely, thank you, Douglas. And we certainly, on Broadcasting Scotland, we never forget the humanity of the fundamental humanity of the situation here, and
Absolutely.
the need to approach the rights of these people in a humanitarian and in a humane manner. And actually, but we'll stay in Europe now for our next story, because Dutch prosecutors today began their closing arguments in the trial of suspects in the downing of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 over eastern Ukraine in 2014. 3 Russians and a Ukrainian, all of whom remain at large, could face sentences of up to life imprisonment if found guilty of helping to supply the missile system used to fire the rocket at the passenger jet as it flew from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. All 298 people on board died. In their closing arguments, prosecutors said that the plane was shot down by a Russian-made missile. Prosecutor Thies Berger recalled the moment on July the 17th, 2014, when Ukrainian air traffic control lost contact with flight MH17. At that moment, a warhead from a Buck missile detonated to the left of the cockpit. Shrapnel and missile parts pierced the left of the cockpit, and the accompanying blast does the rest, Berger said. The passengers of flight MH17 didn't stand a chance, he added. None of the defendants were present in court. One suspect, Russian Oleg Pulatov, has sent lawyers to represent him during the trial. The others, Russians Sergei Dubinsky and Igor Girkin, and the Ukrainian Leonid Karchenko, have never cooperated with the court and are being tried in their absence. Flight MH17 was flying from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur when it was shot down by a missile fired from territory held by pro-Russian rebels during fighting with the Ukrainian government troops, international investigators say. After years of collecting evidence, a Dutch-led international joint investigation team concluded in 2019 that the missile launcher used to hit the civilian aircraft came from a Russian army base just across the border. The Dutch government has said it holds Russia responsible, but Moscow has always denied involvement and has promoted a range of alternative theories, which the international investigators rejected as being unsupported by any evidence. So, Douglas, first of all, with Russia reported now to be on significant military manoeuvres to the east of Ukraine, will the imminent completion of this trial assist perhaps with efforts to protect Ukraine's borders?
That I don't actually know. Again, just talk about a situation that's very difficult to get your head around sometimes. All I can say is that a couple of other MPs, myself, went out to the Donbass region a few years ago to try and better understand the conflict situation that was happening with Ukraine and well, I'll say Russian forces that were put into Crimea. And there is, there's obviously a big Russian population in that area, and I think Russia felt that they were justified in doing what they did. But I think you need to come back to what is the international norms in these situations, and the uneasy relationship. I think that probably doesn't do justice to it. But the relationship that currently exists between Ukraine and Russia is dreadful, and I think the powers that be, whether that be the UN or sort of NATO or any of the Western countries, really haven't had the opportunity to use as much of the diplomacy required and statesmanship required to actually find a lasting solution. I don't think that a lasting solution is in sight. In fact, it seems that people are quite happy to ramp up some of the saber rattling that seems to be going on at the moment on both the Russian side and on the side of NATO. So how do we actually try and get round this? And I think obviously Ukraine feels that and knows that a huge chunk of its landmass has been taken by Russian forces. We've got real sort of pinch points as well in the Black Sea. What's happened there? It doesn't seem that long ago since Ukrainian boats were being, naval boats were being held by Russian forces. So the situation in the Donbass when we were there was it was just unbelievable. I think towns and villages that were economically vibrant and maybe not great places to be, but nevertheless gave people a living in a standard of life. All that has just been sort of washed away. A lot of the buildings and so on were just reduced to rubble, and it was very sad to see that part of Ukraine being sort of reduced to that level of life, and what the solution might be, I don't know, and I'm not sure if this judgment actually changes very much, other than gives some sort of closure, if you like, to what's actually happened. But again, when I say closure, the Russians are not prepared to accept a verdict. So we're constantly in these situations where it's very, very difficult territory for any reasonable minded person to actually trying to get to a solution. We should be going through what was known as the Minsk Agreement, which was to try and bring peace and a level of stability to the region, but the Minsk Agreement's been a failure, and I think the more difficulties that we have with not getting to a diplomatic solution, I think it just opens the door for for more tit for tat type tactics that could result in a very, very serious situation developing on the borders of Europe. And I think if that happens, then again, as I said, it puts us in a really, really difficult position. And I know that over the years, speaking to people in what used to be in Soviet Union countries, like Estonia, Latvia, and so on, they continue to be exceptionally worried by having Russian troops on their borders or close to their borders, and equally the Russians are becoming a bit nervy about having NATO troops based in these countries as well. And I think any commentator I've heard and read over the last few years, they have been really concerned that there might be a conflict arising there through somebody's error of judgment or sort of misjudgment of what the other side did or said, and before you know where you are, you've got a sort of hot war instead of what we've got just now, which is a hot war in places, but it's a Cold War standoff between Russia and Ukraine. And again, it's just hard to try and anticipate what might happen. But all the pieces of the jigsaw are there to make it a very dangerous situation to be anywhere near. And I think only time and perhaps the good sense of some parties might be able to come in and take the heat out of the situation. But I'm not seeing a tremendous amount of activity in that field. So
yep,
let's see what
absolutely.
2022 brings if we can keep the peace until then.
Thank you, Douglas. And certainly I think we'll be continuing to report on events in Ukraine through 2022. But what we'll do now is we'll change geographical location, and that's because Gabriel Boric, a left-wing former student leader, will become Chile's youngest president after storming to a resounding victory in a runoff vote against his ultra-conservative far-right opponent, Jose Antonio Cast. With nearly 97% of the vote counted, the 35-year-old claimed 55.8% of the vote to take a 12 percentage point lead over Cast, who quickly accepted his defeat and called Boric to congratulate him. We are a generation that emerged in public life demanding our rights be respected as rights and not treated like consumer goods or a business, Boric said in front of a vast crowd packed into a Santiago boulevard. We no longer will permit that the poor keep paying the price of Chile's inequality. Boric has vowed that he will oversee a youth-led reform of inclusive government to attack nagging poverty and inequality, which he has pinned on the free market economic model that was imposed during the Augusto Pinochet dictatorship. His progressive campaign promises included fighting climate by blocking a proposed mining project in the world's largest copper-producing nation, and ending Chile's private pension system, which is a hallmark of the Pinochet neoliberal model. His relative inexperience was regularly highlighted by his rivals, but on Sunday night, Boric was fluent and assured as he reiterated his campaign pledges before the raucous crowd of supporters. He thanked each candidate in turn, including Cast, and reinforced his commitment to Chile's constitutional process, a key consideration for many as the country embarks upon this latest chapter in a turbulent period of transition. So, Douglas, Boric does not have a significant track record in national politics in Chile, and so thinking about the politics generally, do you think that that lack of a track record was an advantage in the election, and do you think, well, on the other hand, might that make it more difficult for him to govern when he takes office in March next year?
Well, it may well do, but I think what we should be focusing on is the values that the new president might be able to bring to what is a fantastic country, and or has the potential to be a fantastic country. I think we all look back. Certainly, people in my generation probably look back at the Pinochet regime and everything that was responsible for, and indeed the cozying up to the Pinochet regime by Margaret Thatcher, and his invitation to Downing Street and so on. But I think that a lot of these countries, not just in South America, but where they've had a severe right-wing government, and a lot of the time they've had wealth beyond their dreams in some respects, but that wealth has never got down to the people who live in the towns and villages and across the country. It's been siphoned off by some of the government elites and so on, for their own benefit. So I hope the values that the new president brings to the people of Chile is one that focuses on the things that we think are important as well, like health and education, and developing a fair economy. I think these are the kind of values that I think we could understand and buy into as well. And I just wish the new president every success, and I hope he's given the level of support across all the other parties as well to buy into making Chile a fantastic country again. And let's hope that worldwide that we've seen the last of many sort of right-wing, almost fascist dictatorships that have blighted countries across the globe. So it's not a way of living. I don't think. I'm not against having a market economy. I'm not. But I think the whole point, I think, is that you earn money and you create wealth to be shared for the benefit of your population. You don't create wealth and that kind of thing for the benefit of a few. And as I say, I wish the new president every success, and I'm sure any reasonably minded person would wish him the same as well.
Would do likewise. Thanks, Douglas. And for our next story, we'll return to Scotland, because plans to deliver a new deal for tenants with stronger rights, greater protections against eviction, and access to greener, higher quality, more affordable housing have been launched. The proposals, which are open to public consultation from today, aim to deliver a fairer rented sector that meets the needs of tenants and welcomes responsible landlords. They include increasing penalties for illegal evictions and stronger enforcement, evictions during the winter, giving tenants greater right to personalise their homes and keep pets, developing a system of rent control for the private sector, housing standard to apply homes, a private rent sector regulator standards and ensure the system is fair for both landlords and tenants, and setting minimum standards for energy efficiency, making homes cheaper to heat while contributing to Scotland's climate change targets. The measures form part of the Housing to 2040 strategy, published in March this year, and take forward several commitments made in the cooperation agreement with the Scottish Green Party. The results of the consultation will feed into the final version of the strategy to be published next year, with elements of the proposals put to the Scottish Parliament in a housing bill in 2023. This consultation, however, closes on the 15th of April 2022. So, Douglas, thinking of you in your position as a constituency MP, what are the housing priorities or issues that you're perhaps seeing in your mailbox or your mailbag? And do any of these items in the consultation that I mentioned, will they begin to address what you're seeing in your mailbox or your mailbag?
Well, as an MP, I think we get our fair share of housing issues, and I think a lot of them are really about the inability of the council to supply the houses that people actually need. I think the big issue as well, and obviously I was more aware of this at the time when I was a councillor and dealing with housing issues at that point. But I think there's a lot of things in the consultation that we should really take more seriously, and we're still, although an energy-rich nation, for example, still asking people to live in accommodation that really is not fit for a Scottish winter. And I think that's one area that I would hope the Scottish Government could take even more action on in terms of insulation, and I think there's big opportunities as well to deal with the bigger issue, which is around heat and how we heat our homes, and whether that's in the future maybe a shared community heat system, or whether it's exchanging existing gas boilers for hydrogen, or a mix of hydrogen and gas boilers in the future. And I think all that kind of legislation about how we do that and the speed of conversion would not only benefit the environment and benefit the householder or the tenant, but also create hundreds and hundreds of jobs the length and breadth of Scotland. So I think there's big opportunities there. I think the other thing as well is I was speaking to a company called AC White and Company not so long ago, and they're looking to develop what they call a carbon army, which is having joiners, plumbers, sparkies, you name it, in terms of like going through apprenticeships and retraining to actually help them almost retrofit some of the homes we have at the moment, which in a lot of cases are, as I said before, probably not fit for a hard Scottish winter, and people are paying far too much in terms of their weekly income or monthly income, in terms of their fuel bills and so on. So I think with initiatives like that, and I think we should be asking more as well of our house builders to make sure that when their houses are being built, they're properly insulated. They've maybe got solar panels, or they've got some method of heating the home without reverting to fossil fuels. And it can be done. We're seeing it in fairly small scale developments at the moment, but I think there could be an awful lot more done, and I hope that this kind of consultation sort of triggers the thought processes and triggers the actions that are required to have a better range of housing stock across Scotland. I also just say as well, one thing that I've been watching as well, just about rewilding and how that is impacting on rural communities, and I think in particular those in the north of Scotland and a lot of rural communities are really badly let down at the moment, just lack of housing, and to have families living in either quite low standard old like agricultural cottages, or in temporary accommodation somewhere, it is really that is no way to say to people you're living in an ambitious country that's looking after your best interests. And housing is at the very core of a family's life. If you live in a rubbish house with poor insulation and poor heating, that affects not just the parents in terms of having to shell out to pay the bills, but also affects the quality of life for young people. And I think if we can change that, then I think there'd be a direct correlation between improving that situation and actually seeing kids do better at school, and giving themselves a better chance of making their own way in the world when they become adults. And I think there's big opportunities there, and I just hope that the responses to the consultation help us get this right.
Of course. Thank you, Douglas. And that was our final item this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. If you would like to support us, and we would really like you to support us, then please consider subscribing or donating to Broadcasting Scotland. You will find the link to do that on the screen now. Meantime, we will be here at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening for the next edition of Scotland at 7, so please join us again then. But for now, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for joining us on Broadcasting Scotland, and of course, a very big thank you indeed to Douglas for joining us this evening. Thanks, Douglas.
Have a great Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's the way it is at very nearly Scotland at 8. I hope that you keep warm and keep well. Bye-bye.